The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, is renewing its call for an Electoral Offences Tribunal to tackle the growing backlog of cases. INEC Chairman Mahmood Yakubu made the appeal on Friday in Abuja during the Commission's first quarterly consultative meeting with the media. Yakubu said the current system, where electoral offences are handled by magistrates and state high courts, slows down prosecution. He noted that many cases remain unresolved, sometimes carrying over to future elections. He emphasized the need for a special tribunal with specific jurisdiction and a set time frame to ensure swift justice. INEC has repeatedly called for electoral reforms to enhance the credibility of Nigeria's election process. To discuss this, we're joined by an election observer with Connected Development, Emmanuel Njoku. Thank you so much, Mr. Njoku, for joining us. Mr. Emmanuel Njoku, can you please unmute your device? We can't hear you yet.
It's not muted.
Okay, yeah, we can hear you now. So how effective is the current system of handling electoral offences in Nigeria? Let's start from there.
Yeah, clearly, INEC has not been successful in handling electoral offences issues because justice, when it comes to do with generally everything, but more around the electoral offences, should be timely, should be prompt, and it should be seen to happen. But where election passes and people you see clearly that violated the Electoral Act and committed electoral offences are not prosecuted, like the chairman said, most times it is carried over to the next election. So INEC, who typically by the Electoral Act has the mandate to tackle electoral offences, has repeatedly told Nigerians that they do not have the capacity to do this. I mean, I think the time has come for us to unbundle INEC in this regard and put this in, whether it's through any other electoral offences commission, or allow the Nigerian police force to handle these activities, both civil and criminal offences that can arise from elections. INEC they've told us clearly that they cannot do this. I think we should take this completely from them and allow the Nigerian police to do this, because it's an offense. Like the INEC chairman has said clearly, INEC does not have the powers to enforce any law. INEC does not have cells. INEC does not have where to keep these people. And in many cases, the biggest challenge with these problems of electoral violence electoral offences is that when people commit electoral offences, the cases must be tried in the jurisdiction or in the state where these things happened. Typically in the states, in a magistrate court where this thing happens. But by the time you stretch this case, the IPO usually that was handling the case, when you allow the case to keep dragging on, you see that it gets to a point where the IPO that handled the case has been transferred. And when the case is transferred to another IPO, the IPO has also been transferred. And just over time, there won't be enough evidence to be able to try these guys and put them behind bars. So, yeah, we need to review this whole thing and bundle INEC in this regard. And when they say Electoral Offences Commission, in my mind, I keep asking, looking at the cost of governance, do we really need to set up a full government parastatal, a full government institution just to manage electoral offences? I believe there are security agencies already on ground who can handle this without necessarily creating a full parastatal of government with all the bureaucracies and with all the costs that will go with it just to tackle electoral offences. I think the Nigerian police should be able to lead on this. I mean, in elections, mostly Nigerian police is the lead agency when it comes to election security and everything that concerns security in elections. And
do you think that establishing an electoral offences tribunal would be better when we look at the timeliness you've mentioned about? We've heard of undue interference by those who have vested interest in those cases.
Yeah, so that's what we talk about being timely when these things happen. And just like we talked about when candidates go to court to try to get judgment, all of these things needs to happen before the people who won the election, before candidates are sworn in. Which is usually May 29th. Elections happen usually within February and March. So this thing needs to be timely as such that before the candidates who won are sworn in, both tribunal issues around candidates and every issue, including electoral offenders, should have been tried. Because you know that these guys who commit electoral offences, they do not just wake up from their houses and decide to go and commit electoral offences. They are funded. They represent a candidate. They represent a political party. So most times when you allow these things get to a point where the candidates, where people have been sworn into office by May 29th. And mind you, these cases are tried in the state, at the state magistrate courts, where the governors and the political elites decide who becomes the judge in the state courts. So if you don't get this thing tidied up before the May 29th, you will see that justice will not become will elude everybody in this process. So yes, there is really need for us to put this together while everybody is still in that euphoria and excitement and confusion of election and what happened in the election. People should also see in the news that out of these 730 something persons who have been convicted, with all the evidence available at that time, that before May, you should have seen that close to 300, 400 of them have been, prosecuted and if found guilty, jailed. That way, to have an impact and to have an effect in the mindset of Nigerians who may who may have intentions in the future to get involved in electoral violence.
Okay, so we understand what needs to be done now, but then there are still issues with setting up an Electoral Offences Tribunal. How do we overcome that hurdle?
Frankly, I think with the paucity of funds in the country, I think Nigeria should be looking at the direction of cutting cost of governance. While I think INEC, INEC has told us clearly that they don't have the capacity to handle electoral offenses. So while I agree with INEC, they don't have that capacity, I don't think I'm also a fan of creating like I said earlier, having a full Electoral Offences Commission just to try electoral offenses. Electoral offense is a crime in Nigeria, and I believe that the Nigerian police should have the capacity to handle this effectively without creating a full agency with all the bureaucracies, with all the organogram, and with all the costs that goes with government institutions in Nigeria. I do not think the Nigerian police is sufficient to handle this, and this task should be put in their hands to do the needful.
And you think when this is done, it will deter those who would want to cause violence in subsequent elections? So
Nigerian police by itself will not be able to exactly do that, which is where we need in the Electoral Act. There needs to be a timeline. We need to have a timeline of some sort, or some legal framework that will ensure that these cases are tried and put to rest within a period of time. That way, both the judiciary, whether we're going to have special courts, but how to go about this is what should feed into the conversation that we are having right now around electoral reforms, because it's important that this is a major issue when we talk about having credible elections. So as we are discussing electoral reforms and talking about what should be and what shouldn't be, this has to be a critical conversation in the electoral reforms that is ongoing right now.
All right, thank you so much, Emmanuel Njoku, for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you for having me.